If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
All new on The More Show. A family lost.
One morning I woke up and my whole family had gone from me.
A survivor of forced marriage, Jasvinder Sanghera, speaks of her harrowing tale of abuse, ostracism and being disowned by a family at just 14.
And they made it very clear to me that from this day forward, you are now dead in our eyes.
Plus hear what Charly Flower has to share for women to stay safe, heal and bring back lost power. Most of us look forward to the day when we find that someone special, settle down and share our future with that chosen life partner. This isn't the case for some girls in our country. According to the Home Office, there are roughly 5,000 to 8,000 cases of forced marriage in the UK every year. Girls aged 15 to 18 and even some as young as 9 are forced by their parents to marry a complete stranger. Whilst most were female, 14% were male. What happens to the lives of these young girls after their marriages have deteriorated? In 2005, Navjeet Sindhu, 27, a loving mother and wife, leapt in front of a 100-mile-an-hour train with her kids. It was claimed that she'd been depressed within her marriage and has been frequently abused, which drove her to take not only her own life, but those of her children as well. She did not want them to experience the trauma that she had been subjected to. Surjit Atwell was murdered by her husband and mother-in-law in 1998 when she was caught having an affair and wanted a divorce from her unhappy marriage. This was deemed to bring shame to the family. She was strangled to death and her body was thrown into the river. "20-year-old Banaz Mahmood was raped and grotted by Muhammad Ali, 29, and Omar Hussain, 33, who were recruited by her father and uncle in January 2006. She was said to have brought shame on the family by falling in love with another man following the failure of her marriage. Hashu Yunus was stabbed 11 times by her own father when he discovered that she wasn't a virgin anymore and dated a man outside their culture. "19-year-old Roxana Naz was murdered by her mother and brother when she wanted to divorce her husband, whom she'd only met twice after a forced marriage at 15 years old. "17-year-old Shafili Ahmed had dreams of becoming a lawyer, but this dream was snatched away when her parents attempted an arranged marriage in Pakistan. In September 2003, Shafilia went missing, and her body was discovered 5 months later. Her parents were charged with the murder of their daughter 8 years after her death. It is difficult for us to comprehend that these tragedies are happening in our own country to maintain the family honour. But some victims manage to escape. My guest, Jasvinder Sanghera, is a survivor of forced marriage. Her difficult decision to escape came with tears, rejection, abuse, but most importantly, courage. Jasvinder Sanghera grew up in a Sikh community in Derby. Arranged marriages were a common tradition in the community, At age 14, Jasvinder was shown a picture by her mother of her future husband in India.
And my mother then just said to me, I'm going to put the picture on the mantelpiece and you need to look at it because that's who you're going to marry in the future. As a young person, I had one sister younger than me, so I'd witnessed my sisters being married. And as a young person growing up, I also witnessed their marriages as being quite abusive and them being very sad. And with a couple of my sisters, I'd witnessed their partners beating them up, and we would go to the house with my mother and father. And I always thought my parents were going there to rescue them, but then my mother would sit there and she would explain to my sister, who was clearly hurt, abused, and explain to her why she was not allowed to leave her husband, why she had a duty to stay in that marriage for the sake of the family's honour.
Her mother started to plan Jasvinder's wedding when she was 15 and a half, but she protested against it.
And that's when they took me out of school and I was kept a prisoner in my own home. And that was when I heard them making the plans, one of which was to book the tickets to take me abroad with my mother and a sister, an older sister, to get me married. I was very scared, I felt extremely isolated, and bearing in mind I was locked in a room. So in my mind, the only way out of this, to get some freedom to plan an escape, would be to agree. So I said to my mother, yes, okay, I'll get married, Mum. And she was absolutely delighted because here was her daughter conforming like the others, and I was allowed out the room, the front door was allowed to be open, and then I planned my escape and I ran away from home when I was almost 16. One of my best friends was an Asian girl, and I was allowed to go to her house because she was an Indian girl, and I said to her, look, this is happening to me, I need some help. And she said, my brother will help you. And I got to know her brother, and he said he would help me to escape. And I remember running out the house, really running as fast as I could, to where he works, and hiding behind a wall, waiting for him to come out, and begging him to leave today, because we had to go today, because they were going to take me to India. Go, we have to go. I remember being in the car, his car, and driving all the way up to Newcastle, because Newcastle was so far, we thought they'd never find us there. And all the way from Derby to Newcastle, which is a long journey, it's about 3.5 hours, I sat in the footwell of the car because I was so scared that I was being followed. And if I got up, they would find me and take me back.
Jasvinder was eventually reported missing by her family, and after months of hiding, a police officer found her.
And I pleaded with the officer not to send me home because they were forcing me to marry. So the officer said to me, you have to ring home and say you're safe and well. I won't tell them where you are, that's the deal. So that's exactly what I did. I rang home, and I was hoping my mother would say, come back, it's okay, you don't have to marry that stranger. You can go to school and carry on with your life. But she didn't. She made it very clear to me that from this day forward, you are now dead in our eyes. You have shamed us and dishonoured us. And the only way you can come back home, and you can come back home, is if you marry that man. Every day I didn't want to wake up. I'd attempted suicide. It was this feeling of, they're my family. Overnight, I'd lost everything I'd ever known. Sometimes at night, we would drive to Derby at 3 o'clock in the morning. He would take me to Derby and drive around the streets just so that I felt a familiarity. I would watch my father, who used to work nights, come home from work from a distance just so I could see him. I did that for almost 2 years. In my head, there was this strong pressure to go back home and give in to them. But then there was a voice inside me saying, no, don't do that.
Jasvinder did not see her family again until the birth of her first child, Natasha, at the age of 19, when her mother visited her in the hospital.
There she was, sat there, refusing to look at me. She sat with her back to me. Now and again she would look at my daughter and then turn her face away and walk out.
Although Jasvinder did try to reconcile with her family, even on her mother's dying days, Jasvinder was never allowed to be seen visiting her mother by her family.
Even though my mother knew she only had so many hours left, she still did not want me to be around the bed.
Jasvinder then made a conscious decision to remove all expectations from her family, to live a life without a family, and to let go of thoughts that one day they will accept her back. She went on to rebuild her life and had 3 children and earned herself a degree at 30.
I sent my graduation invitation to my father to attend my graduation. He was alive then. And I remember I did the student vote of thanks. That's the first speech I had ever done in my life. And that was in 1998. And I remember looking out in the audience, looking for my father, and he didn't turn up. But then when my father died, he made me an executor of his will. Out of all the children, he made me an executor. And I, for the first time, had access to his house. He entrusted me to ensure that his affairs were taken care of. And when I went into his house and went to his bedroom upstairs, there in the bedroom, in the corner on the wall, was my graduation picture, in the corner. And I just felt as if he was speaking to me, as if he was saying to me, I couldn't say this to you when you were alive. And that's sad. But, it's for me a testimony to the decision I made. In a way, my father was saying, I trust you and I'm proud of you. That's what he was saying to me.
Because of the decisions that Jasvinder made 20 years ago to say no to a forced marriage, her children will never inherit the legacy of that abuse, and she sits here today as a free woman.
We'll be back after the break to speak to Jasvinder Sanghera, a woman who fought for her freedom and rights to happiness.
After the break, discover how Jasvinder rebuilt her life without a family.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
This is Jasvinder Sanghera, who said no to a forced marriage at 14 years old.
Joining me now is Jasvinder Sanghera, who broke free from a forced marriage. Her experience inspired her to form Karma Nirvana, a charity that supports victims and survivors of forced marriage and honour-based abuse. Jasvinder, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
That's powerful stuff, that was.
Yes.
Well, what's it feel for you to look back at that right now?
I still get quite emotional. As a survivor of a forced marriage, you live with the experience every single day. And I think in my own mind, especially when I see my children, the sad thing is they have also inherited being disowned by my family. And it's sad as a parent that your children lose out.
Yeah, but I suppose that at least they're never going to have to experience what you went through.
Absolutely. I don't regret my decision at all. When I finally made the transition from feeling that I'd dishonoured my family, that I was the perpetrator, and owned being the victim, that's when I started to heal and own the fact that, you are a human being worthy of honour.
Absolutely. So forgiveness from your part's taken place.
Absolutely. Forgiveness is absolutely fundamental to my healing, and it should be for anybody else out there.
Yeah.
I think as a victim of forced marriage, because it's your family doing this to you, you make so many excuses because you love them dearly.
Yeah, of course. And the word prevention kept coming into my mind when watching that. I'm sure the audience would feel the same way as well. Tell me what you do and what your work in your group Karma Nirvana and how that's helping to prevent forced marriages.
Well, Karma Nirvana support, it's important to say both men and women, because boys are also victims as well. We have the National Helpline, which receives over 500 calls a month nationally here in Britain. So we're dealing with crisis calls all the time. We also go out and do a lot of awareness. At the heart of tackling this is prevention. Where we really need to be is in schools. We need to get into schools because your experiences starts off as a very young person. Raise awareness, get posters up. Even people watching this programme can put posters up in their GP practice.
Yep, because let's just get this right for the audience as well, because this was my conscious rising for this as well. My awareness was made more aware for the subject that, you know, it's not a religious thing.
No.
The arranged marriages, is it?
No, I mean, my mother was a very devout Sikh woman. We were a Sikh family. But my mother did use religion to make me believe you had to go through with it because of the faith, and that is not the case. All the major faiths, be it Islam and Sikhism, fundamentally speak out against forced marriage. Sadly, many victims don't really understand that to be true. But my message is, the faith actually supports you. It supports what I'm saying, that this is wrong, and nobody's doing this in the name of tradition or in the name of religion.
But then they say that it is. They say that it's in the sacred texts. But that's not quite right, is it? In your opinion?
This is man-made. These are people, these actions, this is oppression,
Yeah.
this is abusive. You know, people use religion and tradition to excuse a forced marriage. You know, we need some leadership on this from our religious leaders to be speaking out against this.
Is that quite important, that support from the religious leaders in this?
I believe it is.
England?
I'm disowned by my community, so I don't have a voice in that community. They have power in that community as leaders, so they have the power to speak out.
Yeah, of course. And just going back to what you said about the schools as well. So you've just visited a school,
Yes.
haven't you? But how hard was that to get access to that?
Well, Karma Nirvana have been campaigning right into schools since 2008, since in Britain we noted over 2,000 girls went missing from education at risk of forced marriage. Every year they are at risk, but no schools were responding or engaging. And even today, we still struggle. The fact that I've gone to one school in the last 4 years is not good enough.
No. And is that because it seemed to be don't get involved in my culture, it's my culture, where you say it's more of a child abuse issue?
Well, forced marriage is clearly child protection, it's child abuse. If somebody is above the age of 16, it's a criminal activity, it's public protection. I think schools and many professionals, police as well out there and other professionals, fear because they think somehow this is cultural. They've been trained to be culturally sensitive. Also, there is a real fear that they may be called a racist, and perpetrators use that as well. So we've got to empower professionals to respond to this for what it is. It is clearly abuse, and get schools to engage without the fear of offending communities. That's the fear.
Okay. Now, your book, which I've gone through, Shame Travels, you talk in this book about you had a reconciliation with your family as well.
Yeah.
Just explain what happened there.
Well, when I went to India, I was never allowed to go to India because my father said shame travels. So I dishonoured my family in Britain and I dishonoured them in India. So I went in my own right to find a sister whom I've never met in my life. I did find her in the end, and it was very important to me that she saw me for who I am and what I stand for. So I was very honest. And she's the only sister, although born and raised in India, that accepted me for who and what I am. And in fact, she said, Jasvinder, you haven't dishonoured anybody. They dishonoured you. So it was powerful for me to hear that. I've never heard that before.
No, and that goes against completely what your parents were standing for.
Yeah, I almost think that being here in Britain, they held on to their belief and value system so steadfastly, even if it meant oppressing one.
Yes. I mean, and how did that make you feel when you heard that from your sister? Was that a point where you thought, well, I don't need to live with this anymore?
It reinforced my position of not wanting to live with this anymore. It validated it again, that I'd made the right decision. I also felt a huge sense of loss. That this sister out there in India, whom I was never allowed to meet because I was the shameful one, I'd missed out on all that time.
Yes.
But also I felt an immense amount of justice as well. And I was thankful for understanding more about my father's heritage, which I can now pass on to my children.
Absolutely. And your sister, Rubina, she killed herself, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah.
Rubina was 2 years older than me, and she was forced to marry when she was 15, taken out of school, missing from education for almost a year. And sadly, my sister Rubina felt so isolated, and the responses my family gave her in her abusive marriage was to go back to make the marriage work for the sake of the honour of the family. In the end, Rubina set herself on fire, and she died when she was 24 years old. And in fact, for me, I felt that to be the catalyst in making a decision to speak out against
Right.
this abuse.
And that's where that was the point where you set up Karma Nirvana.
Yes, it was.
As well. So is that in her honour, in a sense?
It is, yes, in her memory and in the memory of all those who've gone before us, those we've yet to reach. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. And in the audience we've got Trish as well. Now you've played a very important part in your life, Jasvinder, didn't you?
She has, yes.
And just
absolutely.
explain that as well.
Well, one morning I woke up and my whole family had gone from me. I had no choice in that. They stopped talking to me and I was dead. So for me, friendships are extremely important because friends become your family.
Yes.
And to me, Trish is the closest thing I have to having a family member.
Yeah. And for yourself, Trish, as well, is that what you've, I mean, even though I look at this, Jasvinder, and I think, well, this is just one amazing woman who has gone and has done some incredible, it's doing some incredible things, but for yourself, it's more, you know, that's my family, Jasvinder is my family.
For myself, it's about me being a British woman and having a large, extended, loyal, supportive family, no matter what age I get to,
Yes.
and my children have that too. When I first met Jasvinder and heard the story, I couldn't comprehend waking up the next day and not having any of my family members to be there for me in your ups, your downs. So that's what touched me primarily.
Yes.
And obviously the Karma Nirvana project was about helping other people that had lost exactly what Jasvinder had lost.
Yeah.
And that's where it started.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible the journey that you're on, and thank you very much for that. I appreciate
And just
it.
to add some humour to that, Trish
Yes.
was actually my birthing partner when I gave birth to my son.
Oh, right,
Because
okay.
none of my family have ever been there
No.
when I've given birth
No.
to children. You
So
know,
do- I
we've
mean, yeah, you
never
just-
had a birthday card.
That's right. You don't think of things like that, do you? You just think of the birthday cards. Do you know the things that we just take for granted?
Yes.
You know. So we really have to appreciate sometimes when our family's around us, just how special that is. You know, because we take things for granted sometimes,
Well,
don't
that's
we?
a luxury to me.
Yes, absolutely it is. Absolutely. With your work then,
Yes.
where are you taking it in the UK? How are we going to raise the consciousness of this subject? How are you doing that right now?
Well, we also campaign and we lobby Parliament. We now have a Prime Minister, David Cameron, only in January, has called this a barbaric practice in a civilised society, which is little more than slavery, that's what it is. So we now have a debate of whether to make forced marriage a criminal offence. We have the Forced Marriage Act. The National Hour Helpline is now funded by the government. That's really important because charities out there struggle for resources.
Yes.
You know, so the awareness, the campaigning, we have to maintain that.
So just so I'm right, but there is a difference between arranged marriage
Yeah.
and forced marriage, isn't there?
Yes, I think people get confused unnecessarily.
Yeah.
It's simple. One is where there is consent. An arranged marriage is where two people are saying, yes, mum, yes, dad, I
Yes.
want to do this, and they're fully involved. Where families cross the line is when they are forcing them and the person is clearly saying no.
But that surely, if you, with someone in a forced marriage, you know that they've met this person that they, for the first time in their life,
Yeah.
and then they're going to have what would be sex as well.
Yes.
I mean that's got to be like rape, is it not?
Without a doubt, it is rape. If they've never consented to the marriage in the first place, they will be repeatedly raped. And then they are made to make sure the marriage works for fear of dishonouring the family. So everybody around them in the family are forcing them to make the marriage work. Then they're forced to have children with that person, and it just goes on and on.
And again, this leads on to other bits that I've read in your book about the honour killings as well, which we saw in the video.
Yeah, those beautiful women in the video, have been killed for the kind of things that people take for granted here in Britain every day. Banaz being seen talking to a boy, kissing a boy at a tube station, being too westernised. I've seen cases where girls have been murdered for being too westernised, for having aspirations, for saying no to an arranged marriage. Their freedoms and their rights are taken from them. And one of the things that is hugely dishonourable to these families is we integrate in British society. I'm a British-born subject, and in my family's eyes, that was dishonourable enough to significantly harm me or force me to marry.
So for the audience watching, one piece of advice for someone now that watches this and thinks, well, God, I need some help. I could. How can they get help from yourself?
29 years ago this happened to me and there wasn't help available. Today there's no excuse. Nobody out there should ever feel isolated and there's not help available. There are national helplines. Our helpline is there. You can call it in confidence. The people who take the calls will never talk to your family. We have refuge spaces. We can help very young people get into foster placement. So there's a lot more awareness and support available.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, we'll be right back with more from Jasvinder after the break.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
I am a British-born dual heritage. I was forced to marry my childhood sweetheart at 19.
I'm a survivor of honour-based abuse, and I've been suffering this since the age of 19.
What goes on behind the scenes in these women's lives?
I didn't want to let my parents down. What I did was I agreed to the marriage and obviously got married to this ex-husband of mine.
His family member put me in the back of a transit van, and they kept pressurising me and saying they weren't going to let me go out of this van until I agreed to marry him, which then of course I did, and within 2 days the whole thing was arranged. Straight away I wasn't allowed to wear English clothes again. I had to wear Asian clothes. I was not permitted to leave the house. I was not permitted to have friends. I was not permitted to see my family unless they came to see me. The children were not allowed out. The only family members I saw were his family members. I had to eat, drink and wear what he said. I had no finances of my own. I wasn't allowed to have my hair cut unless his mother agreed. You know, everything had to run through his mum and dad. Everything had to be done so that you wouldn't upset him. So breakfast was made on time, the house was spotless all the time, clothes were washed, ironed, you know, in preparation for the next day.
Intimacy was the biggest problem between me and him. You know when you don't love someone, you can't do anything with them, to be honest with you. And with him I couldn't. And I didn't hate him, I did care for him as a children's father, but I couldn't bring myself to be intimate with him. And when I did it used to be like, you know, the next day he'd make my life hell, or he'd be rude or something or the other, or he'd say something. He'd just have a taunting day, could eventually lead to physical abuse.
How have these women been affected physically and emotionally?
It got so bad that I started to have mental health issues. 2 of my daughters had already left me because of their father. My first daughter left when she was 14, my second daughter left at 14, and their father doesn't speak to 2 of the children. He's completely disowned them.
I found it unfair that I had to ruin my life, everything I had, my home, everything I lost. I've lost my life, my dignity over the last few years, and I lost my parents. Well, he's gained my parents. I think this hurts me more than anything, the rejection from my parents, because they're my parents. His parents are still supportive towards him no matter what he's going to do.
My third daughter, she was 11, and I knew I was going to lose her. I knew that if I didn't get her out, I would lose her. He had started to be very nasty to my third daughter, and I knew it was just time to get us both out before I lost her also.
Following the splits from their husbands, these women have built strong and independent lives.
Remember why you ran away from home. Remember why you did this. Remember what's more important to you.
I'm more confident, I'm more outgoing, I have friends. I'm able to look after my family and they're able to look after us. You know, just knowing I can open my front door and walk out anytime I want to is it's like flying. It's really like flying, it's like being free. Because while I was with my husband, all I wanted to do was die, because dying was an escape. It meant that I didn't have to wake up the next day and go through another day of what we were all experiencing. Now, I want to live.
Freedom for me is being able to make the choices I want, being able to make the choices for my children as I want them to be, and being able to live in a civilised manner rather than the violence I used to live in.
Those are just 2 cases out of the thousands that happen here in the UK every year. I'm still joined by the survivor of a forced marriage, Jasvinder Sanghera, and the impacts of the forced marriage that she had to go through. So we've just seen those VT clips there. Pretty powerful stuff.
It kind of makes me really angry when I hear those stories. The anger is about the fact that they could have been prevented. You know, both of those girls went to school here in Britain. Signs could have been picked up, the warning signs about how this was happening to them when they were young people. At the airports, they have a GP, there are so many opportunities, missed opportunities to help them. If they'd have seen a poster in school with a helpline number on, they may have thought to call it. The anger for me is about the injustice that they've experienced. Yes, it's fantastic to hear about them rebuilding their lives from being raped, abused, abducted. It absolutely is appalling.
Does it anger you that people are, that in charge, that people who are in charge of the schools, just, one, don't seem to be, too educated about the subject, and two, don't think it's, that it's happening in theirs?
Well, at the end of the day, schools are also influenced by government. Government can say, you need to be doing this in our schools here in Britain, in England and Wales. We've had 2 government inquiries currently. The last one was May 2011, where clearly, again, the inquiry into forced marriages and honour killings is making the point schools are not engaging. And one of the recommendations from previously and now is to ensure that education, our education minister, writes to all schools in England and Wales. Sadly, the education minister recently announced that he has no intention of writing to schools in England and Wales because he doesn't feel the need to be prescriptive, and yet previous ministers have. For me, that's a backward step, and I'll name him, Michael Gove, is irresponsible to do that. When you hear girls talking about this experience starting from when they were 12 years old, how can you not urge schools to engage on this?
But you are engaging with 10 Downing Street, aren't you?
Absolutely, yes. We lobby Parliament all the time. Yes, we now have a Prime Minister who's given us the debate. There's a debate happening today of whether to make forced marriage a criminal offence. David Cameron speaks out against this as slavery, barbaric in a civilised society is happening. We need effective laws, but we need them to all be saying the same thing.
And just remind me and the audience, how many girls from schools go missing a year?
Well, in 2008, the government did a report and it was noted in 15 areas over 2,000 girls went missing. In one area alone, over 100 girls went missing off school roll and nobody asked any questions about them. They just disappeared.
That's just
like
incredible.
That.
No, what do the teachers think at that point?
Well, the question I ask is, if 100 white British girls went missing from education, we would be jumping up and down. Why do we not jump up and down when 100 Asian young girls go missing from education? Why? Because we're looking at this as somehow being different and cultural. Yes. It's not acceptable because we've become part of the problem.
And how do you find Karma Nirvana once these girls have come back from India? How do you find yourself helping them? Is it just the case of these girls will come to you once they, as a sort of last point of call, or? Well,
we get calls from girls who are in crisis here in Britain. Our government repatriates 400 British subjects back into this country every year. A third are under the age of 17 years old. Once rescued, the sad thing is some of them are returned back to their families because the professional agencies like social services, for example, don't know to think that the family are actually the perpetrators, and they put them right back where the abuse was happening. So it's very much about awareness and ringing a helpline and being able to say that to them.
And something that I think we need to be aware of as well is there's a small population that we mentioned there, a portion of male sufferers.
Yes, 15% of the cases the government deal with are men. We deal with men on the helpline. The reporting of young boys is clearly underreported. It's guaranteed it's underreported nationally anyway. We deal with the tip of the iceberg. But boys are really difficult to reach because I think there is a fear attached to help-seeking behaviour for young men anyway. And within those families, boys are allowed an element of freedom compared to their sisters. So I think they struggle as well with the family.
And in other countries, how's the whole subject of forced marriage handled? Is it just sort of brushed under the carpet? It doesn't happen here?
I think what we have to be mindful of is the issue of forced marriage is a global issue. We deal with victims calling us from America, for example. There was a bit of research done recently by the Tahari Justice Centre, and they identified how over 43 states in America recently, they had identified 3,000 cases of forced marriages. So we know it's happening, but there isn't the awareness there. This is a very hidden issue. Unless you're looking for it, you don't see it happening.
No, that's right. Absolutely. Well, Jasvinder, thank you so much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
And just educating myself and the audience just a little bit on this incredible and heart-touching subject, and the phone numbers as well for yourself.
It's a free phone helpline number, completely confidential, 0800 5 999 247. The 2 survivors you saw are actually call handlers themselves. So if a victim calls a helpline, they can access a survivor and speak to them.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this break.
After the break, ex-bouncer Charly Flower teaches women how to use softness to stay safe, heal, and bring back lost power.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
Welcome back. My guest now is Charly Flower. Now, Charly has years of work as a bouncer and countless martial arts qualifications to her name. Her book, The Power in Softness, teaches a woman how to use softness to stay safe, heal, and bring back lost power. Charly Flower, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Now, Charly, we've seen there on the previous parts of the show about the arranged marriage and some of the videos that we watched as well. Pretty hard stuff, pretty difficult stuff to watch, especially for someone like yourself that teaches empowerment to women. I mean, what advice would you give to some of the women that you've watched there?
I think it's terribly, as I mentioned earlier, that this problem is a symptom of a huge problem globally. And while it is really important to work from the outside in, so you have safe houses and safe places for these women to go, I think in order to implement change and break a pattern and make it really last, the challenge is not breaking a pattern in the short term. The real challenge is to keep it changed in the longer term. I think it's terribly, terribly important that women actually explore their own selfhood, look within and heal wounds that many women carry at the cellular level.
Do you think it's hard to sort of heal those kind of wounds sometimes? I mean, some people aren't ready for that, though, are they?
No, they're not. But ultimately, we all have a choice. And why I often say it's very, very hard to change a pattern and leave, but very often it's much harder to stay. So really, not being confrontational, but being true to self is really critically important, particularly today and this year as 2012 comes.
So how do we change some of our patterns? How do we change the story of us then?
One of the first steps is through protection. Acknowledging the first step for women to actually heal 1,000-year-old wounding from a patriarchal system. The first step is to actually acknowledge that there has been the wounding. Another step is to protect. So protection is really, really important. That's protection on every level. So that comes from the outside, so you're protecting yourself physically. Protection is also an inward state as well, so that you self-protection when it comes to your internal landscape and energy is very important. And that eventually can lead to wholeness and integration.
But where do we get that strength? Where do, anyone that's been through that, and we're referring to women here, obviously, any woman that's been through it, how do we get that strength when, sometimes we can be at a pretty low point? Where's that spark come from?
Well, very, very good question. And the most important place where this comes from is the place that has been so fragmented over thousands of years, is the sisterhood. Women have very often become so fragmented from each other. A lot of the work I do as a soul healer and a female shaman is precisely to offer sacred space so that women can come together as sisters, as in sisterhood, and actually acknowledge, in a safe place, acknowledge the woundings that they have. And that safe framework, that safe holding, can produce absolute miracles in terms of owning the wounding and having the courage to heal it.
But is that a sort of Western luxury in a sense?
Oh, of course, there is that aspect, but everybody on the planet, I know famous Simone de Beauvoir and Marilyn French has said this, which I endorse, which is, for example, if these awful atrocities are happening in India and other countries other than the West, they affect womankind completely around the world. All women are being raped. If it only happens in one country, that is a violation to womankind as a whole on the planet. So that's another reason why it's really important to bring the sisters together.
But can you imagine it though, to make that choice to leave your family?
It basically comes down to self-love, developing an awareness of selfhood, of priority, what matters here. Does my health matter? My inner peace, or do I conform? And this is a personal choice, and not everyone is ready for that.
No, we're not. No, everyone's at different stages, and nor should you rush it. There's no time, is there? There's no finish line to take this process. It's you know, when you're ready, you know, the solution's there. But like you say, it's an inner transformation. And you mentioned one thing there as well, love. Does love solve everything sometimes? Self-love.
Self-love does and can very often. It gives you a measure. This is something that is so badly lacking in the world today, is that people, everybody, we tend to we find answers from without.
Yeah.
And that's where we come a cropper, you know, that's when we make mistakes, because we're not coming from the core, which is our own measure. Through self-love, you develop measure.
And your background as a bouncer, that's very different to where you are now.
Well, yes, the book represents a journey from hardness to softness. And as a sort of kickback, coming back to the West, as a kickback to patriarchal standards for women that have sort of been imposed. Women are very often split two ways. They either are the huge conformists and you know, are trying desperately hard to conform, or they go the other way, they swing the other way and become very, very, how shall I say, hard in their souls and their spirits, and actually align to the masculine way of things, which was my journey. And a lot of women, particularly in the West, are doing that today. So the book is a cry to explain that the power in softness, which is also the power in the feminine, is not a weakness, it's power.
And what sort of, you know, steps can we take, or can women take, to sort of give themselves power back?
Well, one of the first steps is to notice, not just outwardly, circumstantially, but learn to actually look within and notice your mind thoughts, your mind pattern, your mind chatter, and also your patterns, anything that's, you know, is destructive in your life, that is a pattern. These are really, really good keys, doorways into developing selfhood and protection.
Yeah, I mean, the destructive patterns, it's so easy to sort of fall into that trap, isn't it? And not know you're in the destructive pattern sometimes.
Yes.
But do you think sometimes we're addicted to that destructive pattern?
Well, negative pattern really is a kind of addiction. I mean, in the shamanic world, power loss comes through all kinds of things. It can come through fear, it can come through alcoholism, addictions, it can come through all kinds of things. And these are all ways that we give our power away. So a very good start to actually begin that process, that inner process to selfhood and protection is to...
And do you think sometimes that, you know, women are guilty, and some men as well, of falling in love with the potential of a partner instead of the actual?
Definitely. Women are really expert at this. Either I can save him or
yes,
I
can
can
save that person. I'll make, you know, they will change. But they don't, do they?
No. Well, very occasionally, I suppose they might. I'd never say never, but usually they don't. And it's an energy thing. As a shaman, my worldview is purely an energetic one. So if a woman is trying to change and save, she's giving a huge amount of energy out. Is she getting that energy back? That's balance. So that's another way of, another tip. Example.
But in all this work, though, I mean, are men just to sort of blame for these problems? Or?
No, not all men. It's no, they're not. It's about a system. It isn't about individual men. It's about a system of values that the world is in the grip of at the moment. For example, hierarchical structures are valued. Feelings are not valued. It's what we value in the world, and it does happen to be a very much patriarchal one, and which doesn't really include women very much. Yeah.
So as a man, or men watching this as well, how can we help to make a difference?
By joining on this journey and aligning to the feminine and to softness, because softness is balance. And if we are to survive as a species in the way that we really would like, we all have to go towards the feminine, not
Right.
just women,
So just
men too.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, interpret softness then. I mean, how would you...
Well, softness is a power, it's not a weakness. Softness really is balance.
Balance. Yeah.
That's what it really is. And it's,
And that's balance of just how we live our life?
yes, it's inner balance as well, so that if exploring feelings, if one is too aggressive, or if one's holding a lot of anger, for example, anger's a good one. You can't be balanced and while you're holding a lot of anger, it's not possible.
So really, women who have gone through tragic and traumatic times, the first process, though, must be to forgive, surely.
Yes, forgiveness isn't really for the other person, it's for yourself.
Yes.
Because if you, and again, shamanically, if you can't forgive someone, it means you're still energetically tied to them.
And you don't need to forgive as in, they're sat there to forgive them.
No.
You can just do it, quietly in your head as well, can't you?
Absolutely.
And that's just as powerful, or
It
even
is.
more.
Even more, yes, absolutely so. What's crucial is the relationship that you have with that person inwardly. You can forgive somebody completely and they don't even have to be there.
Okay. Right, well, Charly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
For more information on today's guest, go to my website, themoreshow.co.uk. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter to get the latest updates on the shows. So thanks for watching. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much. That was great. That's really good.
Don't forget you can also hear The More Show Late Night Talk on various FM stations across the UK. Check the More Show website for station listings.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.